All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to PyGotham 2019. Yay! Going good so far for everyone, I hope. All right, so basically, a couple of years ago, I started giving talks like this one, like this. Don't worry, it's not a talk about talks. It's not a meta talk. But I gave a talk, and it was called The Packaging Gradient. And the same year, I gave a similar talk here at PyGotham, actually. And it was a pretty good talk, if I may say so myself, I think. But my biggest problem with this talk was basically what came after. What comes after a talk? Questions. So people, they started asking me. They're like, hey, this is a great talk about packaging. I actually have a project, and it's basically like sort of this thing that runs on Mac OS machines, and I'm trying to get it to like run on this and that. And I'm like, wow, that sounds really cool and interesting. I run an Ubuntu machine. Next question. Someone's like, well, I actually have this old Python 2 service that I'm trying to get packaged and bring to this. And I'm like, well, I guess, like I said, you can use app image or maybe Docker or something like that. And another question, and it's, people were like, well, actually, I have like a plugin, and I need to get that package for it. And it just kept coming and coming and coming. And really, I was left with one question, which is that, do people really expect me to know all the answers? And I hope that everyone here, agrees with me that the answer is no. But what I do have for you is basically the ultimate answer to all the questions, which is just ask the ecosystem. So I know that this talk was billed as lessons from 200 plus FOSS applications, but since the thing, I've added an extra 150 just for you. All right, so it's a very exciting time. All right, so let's talk goals. Why do we code? Why did we all get involved in this thing? Let's see. So common inspirations, why we wake up and do battle with technology. Well, sales said that your product does something, and it doesn't, right? Obviously. Or, if you're a software engineer and not just a developer, right? Well, Google just deprecated another API. So, you've got your work set out for you. And if you're into open source, well, GitHub said they need another unit testing util, so you better get to work. And ultimately, it's all about the bosses. So last quarter, your manager said you need to work on setting more aggressive OKRs. And that's really why you should be coding. Solidarity with those Kickstarter people out here in New York. Anyways, okay, so these are all some pretty inspiring reasons to code, right? No, there are two reasons people start wanting to code, right? It's basically, I want to make a video game, or I don't want to use Excel anymore. These are the two reasons people start. Maybe there are other reasons too. I even left a little spot in the Venn diagram where maybe someone has built a game in Excel. It's possible. Don't sell Excel short. I'm a big fan. All right. But anyways, do you recognize any of these names? Let's see some hands. Anki, anyone doing space repetition memorization? Wow, we got a lot of Jeopardy trainees right here. What's the capital of Jordan? All right, BleachBit. Basically, yeah, one hand maybe. Deluge. Okay, yeah, I'm a big fan of that one. FreeCAD. Yeah, big project, exciting. Home Assistant. Any smart home fans here? Okay. Odoo. No, this is more for the business people. All right, Reddit. This is one that should get all the hands. Unknown Horizons. I guess it's still a little bit unknown. Music Brains Picard. Yes, ID3 tags, get them set. And YouTube DL. You got to archive those tech talks, right? Check it out right now. Download this video out there in the world. Okay, so yeah. Anyways, what is true of all of these applications? They are, in fact, popular software. They have a large user base. They are targeted at a non-programmer audience, right? And they are, yes, written in open source Python, but generally not marketed as such. Usually the users of these applications don't care if it's written in Python, the Ruby, C++, JavaScript. It just works, and that's what matters, right? That's what actually inspires us to code, right? We want the rubber to meet the road and the people to use our software. And usually those people aren't developers. So yes, we want to build. But wait, how do we do that again? So basically, when people wonder how they do things in the Python community, they ask questions. We get questions about testing. We get questions about packaging. We get questions about architecture. We get questions about performance. We get questions about documentation, et cetera, et cetera. And so the community responds, right? We say basically, here's the answer on Stack Overflow, right? That's how half the software out here gets written. Blog posts, for those who still write and read them, RSS fans. Yes, yes, RSS. Video tutorials. I got one on O'Reilly, Enterprise Software with Python. Check it out. Tweet rants, because sometimes you just gotta do a one out of question mark. And then finally, conference talks, right? That's why you're all here. You're all at the PyGotham conference to learn how to do many of these tasks, etc. But what about all the other stuff, all the blog posts that didn't get written, all of the conference talks that didn't get accepted, all of the stories that didn't get told, right? That stuff is going to be a lot harder to capture. So here, I'm here to propose an alternative. What you should do is figure out the application you're trying to build, the user you're trying to connect with, the product you're trying to design. Find other applications like that, and then explore those applications and reuse their techniques. Don't wait for a conference talk or a blog post. Go out and seek your answers. And to that effect, I bring you awesome Python applications. These are the case studies to complement your building and learning, whatever stage you may be at. So it looks a little bit like this, a humble readme.md living on a GitHub repo somewhere. It's got an RSS feed. That's a recent addition. So you can follow along as it gets updated. And a whole bunch of categories of where this software falls. It's not really segmented by technology. It's segmented by how you would use it. So let's break it down. What is the APA? Well, first of all, it's awesome. What are awesome lists? They're GitHub's greatest meme, right? Except for maybe initial commits or something like this. It's basically Moin Moin for you 90s kids, but with pull requests. It's like a wiki, but you sort of add links via PRs. It's a resource hub that's chock full of mostly working links, and frankly, that's a pretty good start a lot of the time. 2, it's Python, the obvious choice here at a Python conference especially. So I guess what I'd pose to you, a question I'd pose to you is, you're part of the largest software platform that has ever existed. If you are not making use of the community knowledge built around application building in Python, then why aren't you just programming in some esoteric language like Arc or some variant of ML, right? You have the entire ecosystem to draw from. Let's do so. And 3, they're applications. This may seem obvious to some, but it bears reminding. What is the difference between a library and an application? Well, 1, libraries are developer-facing. Most people here are developers, right? So this is what we usually think about. You pip install these things. They're compiled and imported. And yes, you pip install them from a place that looks like this, PyPI. Everyone familiar with the warehouse? Yes, the warehouse is an awesome Python application. We'll get to that. This contrasts with applications which are user-facing. They're usually configured. You don't write code to make them work. And you don't pip install them. You just install them. To remind you what that looks like, switch app developer mindset. Now you're a software user again. Or maybe you do an app store or a Windows app store or a Snap store, right? There are many ways to install your application. It's more dependent on the platform and era that you may be in. So, OK. But importantly, the APA is more than just a README, right? So you basically have descriptions. That's the human readable part. You have links. I think almost 1,000 links right now. Tags, which make it structured. And most importantly, it's structured. So what's the natural thing to do with something that's machine readable like this? You got to look at the data. It's time to go ahead and analyze what the Python ecosystem looks like, looking at 350 production applications that have shipped. This data was pulled this week, October 1st, early in the morning UTC time. And basically, what I did was I cloned every single repository for every single application that meets this bar. So across 360 repos, that was 37 gigabytes of application history. It's not just Git and GitHub. by the way. It's mercurial and bizarre as well. There are some SVN ones, I'll cop to that. I didn't clone the SVN ones. They're still maintained. Don't get me wrong. They're still valid applications. I'm just like not up on my SVN foo. So yeah, it took about 6 hours to clone them, but I did. And here's what I found. 69 million lines of code. 2.5 million commits across 50,000 committers. So, I mean, this would be the largest, like, engineering org ever, basically, if you thought about it this way. And importantly, as we go into the data, I want you to remember that 95% of these application repositories have been updated in 2019, right? So it's not a hard and fast rule, but I do tend to only add applications that are maintained. I'll just give a quick counterexample of this. Reddit took their code closed source. So there's a 2017 version of Reddit, and that's still on the list. It's still got a lot of really valuable lessons for production code in there. So let's actually look at what we're dealing with here, starting with something nice and simple, the architecture. So what do most Python applications look like? Basically, it breaks down to about 43% of them are server-oriented, multi-user applications, and 57% are desktop applications. That would be GUIs and CLIs. Okay? How does it look over time, right? The evolving ecosystem. Python's been around how long? When was Python first released?
The 90s.
Yes, it was the 90s, 1991, I think. It was before the internet, actually. And so here is what the history of actively maintained Python applications I've been able to find that aren't in SVN looks like. So we can see it dates all the way back to around 1998. Those applications are still maintained, again. And you can see it really swell. And actually, on the desktop side, it sort of tapers off here a little bit, while the server side is still growing. You can really see the web take off for Python around 2005. So we have this basic structure. We're going to be sticking with this kind of structure. But also, I'm going to give you a spotlight on some interesting applications I found. It's really like a treasure hunt. And frankly, there's no way I could fit all my favorite applications into a 45-minute talk, but I really could go on for hours. So find me after. All right. So Ganeti. This is one of the most unique applications I ran into. Anyone here heard of Ganeti? Oh, OK. Yeah. Basically, it's a cluster management tool that predates containerization and Docker and all that stuff. It's focusing on long-lived VMs. So this is basically Kubernetes and this stuff is sort of structured around oh, your worker's inactive. I'm just going to restart it, constantly churning your workers. But if you need something that runs for a very long time, like a job or something like that, you need to have it, you need to solve that problem a little bit differently. That's what Ganeti's about. It's had about 16,000 commits since 2007. It's widely deployed. I saw an interesting article on Wikimedia where they were comparing it against OpenStack, and they use that Wikimedia now. It was originally developed at Google. Now, Google develops a lot of Python software, despite what you may have heard. And so that's not on its own very interesting. It's about 60% Python. What I think is most interesting about it is actually that it's 20% Haskell. It's the only Python application that I've seen that melds Haskell and Python together. And that makes it, I guess, provable. And so, yeah. No, I mean, it's pretty cool for that, for that sake. It's a very rare breed. I definitely recommend checking it out. All right, let's start digging into libraries again. What shoulders are we building on here? So desktop applications, very popular in Python. What do they use these days? Qt. About half of the applications that are GUI applications in Python use Qt. A little over a quarter are with GTK. Then we got WX, Pygame, Kivy taking up the rest. GUI frameworks over time. This actually was one of the starkest findings I found, and I really tried to correct my method, but this is still the result. GTK adoption seems to have really died off in Python around 2012 or so. And these days, if you're starting a GUI application in Python, community seems to agree Qt is the way to go. Again, all of these maintained still, but yeah, that was a very stark drop-off. They renamed some of their libraries and imports a little bit around gobject, but this still seemed to hold. All right, server frameworks. Anyone here do web development? Yeah. All right. So we got some. This one we start to get a little bit controversial, a little bit contentious. So here's the facts, though. Django has got the lion's share of these awesome Python applications, with Flask again making up about a quarter. It's like one might call it the GTK of server frameworks. No, it's not quite that bad, but. Interestingly, Pylons, Pyramid, Zope, even Bottle, all still active users as well. Django, here you can see it really took off when it came. I think it actually came out in 2008, so some older things might have, or no, it came out, when did Django come out? 2005-ish? All right, so yeah, you can see the immediate adoption and takeoff there. But yeah, Pyramid here, Pyramid used for warehouse, PyPI. So we got some Pyramid applications, and even some bottle ones, little tiny bottles. All right, concurrency. Any guesses what's leading concurrency right now? Okay, all right, she got it in one. So yes, the built-in Python concurrency library, async.io, is the leader right now. But it was actually a pretty even split. It was much more even than I thought. After all of the heated debates that I've heard, Twisted, Gevent, Tornado, and concurrent futures are all about roughly about 20%, a fifth each. Async.io just eking out a lead there. Now this one's going to be one that's interesting to watch over time. It looks a little bit like this. So basically, Twisted, Gevent, all these things in really heated competition. That's probably why you see so many interesting blog posts about these things. Any interesting standouts here in this one? There seems to be a very old application using async.io. Async.io definitely was not released in 1998, so it's an interesting sort of anomaly. And when you look into it, it's actually GNU Mailman. Everyone here familiar with Mailman? It is the original listserv. It's a web application and email server for managing subscriptions and discussion activities. It's had 9,400 commits since 1998 January. It has the awesome URL, list.org. And it's the oldest user of async.io. In fact, it's the oldest API project by about 3 months. And it's one of 5 projects on the list to have gone from Python 1 to 2, as well as 2 to 3. It's one of 2 to do the 1 to 2 to 3. So there are some interesting stories there. I'm sure you can talk to Barry Warsaw and all those folks about what went down around the year 2000, which is, I think, when Python 2 came out. All right, so GNU Mailman, another awesome Python application. Currently, it uses Python 3.5. Some of you may be wondering, hey, I wonder what versions of Python 3 people are using. Well, I've got data for you. It turns out that basically most applications that use Python 3 support, around half, I should say, all the way down to like 3.3, 3.4. But some of them have even gone all the way up to using 3.7 plus syntax already. And I'll get into how we got these numbers in a minute. But yeah, I think this was the biggest one for me, and one of the main reasons I cloned all of these repos is probably the most nerve-wracking. We hear all of the struggles with migrating from Python 2 to 3. It's not really a secret at this point. And I was kind of scared to hear, with how difficult it is for open source maintainers these days, are they going to have the time to support their users as well as make the leap to Python 3? I was prepared for the worst, but good news, actually. Yes, fewer than 1/3 of Python applications still rely on Python 2. 11% go through the trouble of working on both Python 2 and 3. But the lion's share of them actually are Python 3 already, and we can mostly breathe a sigh of relief. All right? So this was a lot better than I was expecting. Let's look at what that looks like over time. So an easy theory here is the older projects are using Python 2. That's the real problem here. And that's not strictly true, actually. So when we look at Python compatibility over time, the Python 2 applications, we are seeing a healthy tapering. Fewer and fewer people are using Python 2 in 2018, 2017, et cetera. But new projects are actually starting that are Python 2 only. And sometimes there are reasons for this. Right? If you are making a security agent and you want to run on a huge number of boxes, right? Boxes that you may not control, it has to be Python 2 compatible. Maybe sometimes all they care about is Python 2. There's interesting discussion with the oil shell maintainer where he ported to Python 3 and then back to Python 2, which is kind of an interesting one. But the important thing is looking at this shape, you can see this is clearly the outlier, right? And we see lots of Python 3 growth. It's actually getting extremely crowded in that column. This type of plot is called a swarm plot, by the way. It's very easy to visualize these things. You just blur your eyes and you see the trends. All right, take off your glasses, maybe. Oh, so I had another theory. I'm like, maybe it's just they don't have the resources. And there does seem to be something to this, actually, which is that Python 3 projects tend to have more committers to them. Now, you could say, well, being Python 3, it's just more exciting to work on. But it also may be cutting the other direction, which is that maybe those Python 2 projects just need more people in order to convert to Python 3. So, moving on. You know, it is a lot of work working on open source. I just saw a talk about open source sustainability. And, you know, how do maintainers cope with the commitment of having a big, you know, heavily used Python application? Well, the median number of committers on a project in the list is 55. And 51% of applications are mostly written by one person, going by commit count. So, and what does this translate to? It translates to about 16,000 lines of Python, you know, on the median, written by one maintainer. And that's a lot of work. That's a lot of pressure. 16,000 lines of Python, that's like 160,000 lines of Java, right? So it's a lot of work. But I'm going to spotlight another application here, which is the edX platform. It's got 51,000 commits since 2011. Pretty big project, right? This is of the size of many closed source applications. Many of us work in professional settings, right? And we can still learn from, you know, applications out there because they do get this big. It's a platform for massively open online courses. It's educated hundreds of thousands of people. And it's the third largest Django project on the APA. It's got 300 committers. And it's notable because it's one of only 2 projects that no one person has done more than 10% of the commits on. So I think that there are a lot of healthy lessons that like teams can learn from this. You know, the startup that I work at still has been primarily written by one person, for the record. So it's not like all companies necessarily do this. All right, so here's another contentious one. Licensing, the fun legal part of the talk. The good news is no one wrote their own. All right, so it looks like this, right, with kind of a breakdown of a bunch of different like license groups. It's a little bit messy. It's easier to look at over time. And what we can see here is the rise of open source. That is like permissive licenses like MIT and BSD, whereas less permissive licenses, more hereditary licenses, as we'll get into, sort of like going back further, you know? And what I was sort of happy to see here is that I was worried that free software is going to die. Open source is going to kill free software. But no, there's still a lot of GPL, AGPL, LGPL happening. So hereditary licenses. Basically, this means that if you use this project, you have to use a compatible license that is probably also permissive, as it were. You know, some people call it viral. The healthier term is hereditary, because you have to inherit. Anyways, so actually, yeah, most applications use this, and I'm actually kind of in support of this, because this is my personal opinion. But if you're going to put a default license out there, right? Make it a very restrictive one. Make those commercial contacts come to you and, you know, like actually support the project and pay for a license that suits their needs. I'll give you an example of this. Oh, here's the hereditary licenses over time. Free software is alive. OK, so Sentry, actually a very large Python application. It's a web service and front end for cross-platform application monitoring with a focus on error reporting. It's got 26,000 commits since 2008. And it should be no surprise because it's actually a for-profit company. It is the largest Django app on the list with 1 million lines of Python. And I sort of balked at this at first. I'm like, that's a huge project. And so I checked. It had 120,000 lines vendored. But even so, that's like, you know, 880,000 lines of Python. So that was very intense. And it's on the list because Just for comparison, the largest Flask app is Pajur with 110,000 lines. Pajur is like a Forge. It's like a GitHub, but written in Python. OK. Sentry is actually BSD3 licensed for their whole server code and everything, which is kind of interesting. It's very permissive for something that you rely on for your livelihood. And I don't know, there was a little bit of hubbub about this a little while ago because there was another company called Opbeat that just took Sentry's SDKs and publicly sort of like forked them and built a business on that. A few years later, got acquired by Elastic. Now, I'm not saying they took their server code, but they could have, right? It was BSD3 licensed. You can just pick up that server code and start a business on it. If you want to do like, Sentinel or something like that, right? You could do that. The license technically allows you to. So yeah, David Kramer is from Sentry, and there's Opbeat right there. This is just the client SDK, technically, where this is documented. All right. So finally, I come full circle. I gave that talk on packaging, and I finally get to point people to projects for packaging advice, right? How do you make that Docker file for that one project, right? I'm just going to point you this direction, all right? So, but first, we have to look at those GUI applications, right? And this is to say 62% of them use a technology called a freezer. And I know it's a little chilly in here, but a freezer is basically something that takes Python and your Python code, sticks it together into like an exe or an app or something like that, which makes it very, very valuable for shipping code to people's laptops, And 90 out of 146 applications that use GUIs also use freezers to do so. And here's what the breakdown of that looks like. It makes a cool little peace sign. And PyInstaller and PyDexe kind of almost in a dead heat here with a few other technologies here. But when you break it down by time, the decision gets pretty clear again, which is that PyDexe, PyDapp sort of fade away. These are two sort of platform-specific freezers. And then you get PyInstaller taking over, which can build cross-platform. It builds for Mac as well as Windows. And then, yeah, you got a couple of like things like Pinsys here as well. So spotlight on this is OnionShare. This is a secure anonymous file sharing over Tor services. It's written by Michael Lee. He works at The Intercept. It's a pretty cool application. It's 2,700 commits. Like I said, not all applications need to be really, really huge. I'm pretty sure this has one primary maintainer as well. It supports Linux, Windows, and Mac. It's a fully cross-platform thing. It's fulfilling the dream of being the cross-platform language that Python was supposed to be. And it's built on Qt5, which sort of follows with the other idiom that we saw, where most things have picked up then, since it's started in 2014. And it, in fact, ported from PyDexe and PyDapp, having two separate configurations there, to PyInstaller. And so what's interesting about this is no blog post was written. No conference talk happened. Micah is a busy guy working on security stuff. But that story is there. If you dig through the issues and the commits and so forth, you'll see the trials and travails of someone porting to PyInstaller. If you maintain a GUI app, want to adopt PyInstaller, you can check out Micah's work. And you don't have to wait around for him to go on a podcast or something and talk about it. OK, so like I keep hinting at, the containerization was my bane. This is supposed to be an image, right? Application images. And this is the way it breaks down. So about 80% of the applications that use containerization use Docker, with Flatpak and Snapcraft sort of like splitting up the rest. App image has a special place in my heart. It's a beautiful, simple technology. But Flatpak and Snapcraft have the backing of like Red Hat and Canonical, respectively. So we'll see how that like manifests in a moment here. But Docker, obviously very dominant. Let's look at it over time. So yeah, Docker, sort of exploding with some of the more modern applications. But you see those older applications, they have stories about how they did Docker for their older Python applications, and you can go to their repos and find out about that. Snapcraft here, it's adopted pretty widely, I guess, but for GUI applications especially among canonical apps. And Flatpak goes all the way back, because I think gedit uses a bunch of Python, for instance, and then that's going to have a Flatpak available because Red Hat. So you see a nice spread of all sorts of different applications using that technology. All right, so just wrapping up the data here. What does the median Python app look like, right? Like if we were just to manifest it from our minds, just from the data. This doesn't exist in the same way that like Mohammed Wong doesn't exist, right? But Mohammed is the most common first name. Wong is the most common last name, so Mohammed Wong. There probably isn't Mohammed Wong. Apologies, Mohammed Wong. All right. OK, so something related to communication, collaboration, or development. These are the most common topics where people use Python, right? They use it for forums. They use it for email. They use it for all sorts of developer tools. It's a pretty, that's, I guess, like what Python ended up being good for. Or maybe just what the internet ended up being good for. I'm not sure. It's had 3,000 commits, and it was probably started in 2011. That makes it 8 years old. You know, that's, again, these aren't actually guidelines to be added to the list. This is just sort of how it emerged. You've had 27 drive-by committers that did one commit each. But it's mostly written by one person, as we learned. And it is compatible with Python 3.4 plus, which is great. You know, it was really a relief to learn that. So yeah, I mean, it's 65% Python. Python hybridizes with other languages, including Haskell. You know, but there are Java ones out there, heck of a lot of JavaScript ones out there. So yeah, I mean, Python mixes well, I guess you could say. And it actually probably has a hereditary license, like GPL, MPL, something like that. So yeah, I guess that's like sort of the median Python apps profile right there. Now, I think I need to spend a minute or two just talking about how I did all this. I didn't make it up, that kind of thing. So I actually built an application, not yet featured on the list. It only has 89 commits and was started 2 months ago. Yeah, Appetite starts with APA. It's a mineral. It looks like this. It's a CLI for managing these awesome lists with a focus on metrics. It has plugins for these metrics. The way I got the slot counts is I used a Rust application called Toke. And the way that I detected the licenses was with a Go application called Go License Detector. I needed to do some grouping of the licenses after because it turns out that there are hundreds of variants of licenses. But yeah, the data is actually there in the source CSV, where all good data comes from. I do want to highlight this really great application I found. It deserves a place on the list. I'll add it there, I'm sure. But it's called Vermin. And at first I thought it was like, oh, well, snakes are like vermin, and Python is like snakes. But no, it's much more obvious. It's the minimum version. Right? I'm thinking like way too hard about this. Anyways, so it's a really cool application. There are other applications out there that try to detect what version of Python stuff is like supporting, but those are actually using PyPI classifiers. And what we learned about applications is that very few of them have PyPI links because PyPI is primarily for libraries and developer-focused like tools. So applications generally don't have PyPI classifiers, and you have to instead go off of the language features they're using. So Vermin actually embeds a bunch of different like rules about Python grammar to detect at the function and line level what version of Python is supported. So maybe if you're doing a Python 2 to 3 conversion, or maybe 1 to 2 conversion, I don't know what it supports, but you can check that out, and it's a pretty exciting application. It didn't get a lot of press before this talk. So, and then I had a bunch of heuristics and manual tagging. It's all open source, so yeah, you gotta check it out. Also, the graphs were made out of band by my wife, Maya. Shout out, Maya. Thank you very much for making the graphs. Made with Jupyter and Pandas. Jupyter, of course, awesome Python application on the list. All right. Yeah, so you can check out the code for it at this site, and the Jupyter notebook is actually in the APA repo. So what's next? Basically, we could go on and on about data, but what are we actually going to do with this on an individual basis, right? How are you going to go back to your day job or your open source project and learn from the ecosystem? So basically, you should reference the list for similar applications when you're building your application. That was my recommendation. That's what I will be doing. There are about 2,700 years of maintenance encapsulated in all of these projects. There's a lot of wisdom there that is just waiting to be discovered by you and unlocked. I would love to see some sleuthing. I would love to see some people, buttering each other's bread here and just helping raise the profile of some of these great Python applications. There are some amazing scientific applications in here and genomics and so forth. I'm not qualified to speak on them, right? But if you are, check out the list, find them, talk about them. They're great. Cite them. So a lot of people come to these conferences, myself also guilty as charged, right? I come in, I start talking about best practices, right? I start talking about here's what you should do. And oftentimes it's very hard to have citations for this because it's coming from my professional closed source work, right? But there is actually a lot of, as we learned, great open source work happening, large projects, using the same tools and techniques that you do. You can use the list to find these things, to write better blog posts, to write better tweet rants, So, please use the list to research and create that great content. And finally, recruit. So there used to be a great project called OpenHatch, and there are other similar projects out there. But basically, not all early developers, or even maybe a burned out developer getting back into it, is feeling like doing their own original idea or project or something like that. Here are 360 applications that, as far as I can tell, all welcome new contributors, right? And many of them have a lot of momentum, right? I like to highlight Zulip as having a great onboarding experience for new developers. And you should definitely check out the list for more. And finally, I'll make a plea to you, right? Please help me build this list, right? Appetite is far from complete. I know I have bugs, so we could do a lot more metrics. But also, I would love to do CI on link checking, right? This is a little bit trickier than it sounds, but basically, I don't want this to become another wiki page with a bunch of dead links, another awesome list that goes sort of like unmaintained. If we just set up some automation, we can make sure all the projects stay active, and we can archive the ones that sort of go out of maintenance, right? Just keep the list fresh for new consumers. And also, it'd be great to get to a point where we could do static site generation. So you could do things like say, I'm starting a new project. I'm planning on it using Qt. Show me just the ones in the science domain that use Qt. And I can sort of crib from that. Something a little bit better than Control F on a README or through a CSV. OK. Yeah. Plus, if you just enjoy the treasure hunt, right? We've got the most dangerous game, a big list of popular applications that need review. And so I have a to-do in there. I have a contributing.md in there. Come on by. And I think we also need to sort of share this stuff. Again, I'm just making the list here. These applications did all the hard work, and I would love to see us close this loop on FOSS development. I guess I have a minute, so I'll tell you. I used to work at PayPal, and I was in charge of the Python infrastructure there. And it was a heck of a time getting sort of leadership support for this kind of thing, because they're like, oh, who even uses this stuff? And so guess what I did? I made a YAML file with everyone who used it and who they reported to and how many hits and links to their logs and all of this stuff, so that you make an airtight case for here's all of the teams that are using Python, benefiting from Python. Here's how we can make better decisions around Python. I think that we can close that loop here and actually help make a better sort of Python core developer ecosystem or something like that can take into account aspects of how Python is used in the open source when it connects to real users. So that's my talk. Thank you very much. I'll just run down the link stream here. We've got the APA repo, the Appetite application, which does the work, my Twitter, where sometimes I tweet highlighting interesting applications, and then my blog, where my most recent post is announcing this list almost a year ago, and then yak.party, which is maybe a YouTube channel that maybe I'll do one day. All right. So I think we do have a minute or two for questions. If you'd like, I'll take one or two. But I'll tell you to ask the ecosystem. Yes?
Did anyone use, just because you mentioned Qt, or Qt being so used, use FBS? Yeah, I don't know if you saw that, or my understanding is that it might have a restrictive license. And people don't like use it.
Oh, I see. Yeah, no, I mean, I have to refer you to the data, my friend. Yeah, I don't know that off the top of my head. Yeah. Yes?
Did you notice any sort of trends from projects that come from larger companies having older technology, or?
Yeah, so the question was basically do larger organizations use older technologies? Well, I found some counterexamples to that actually, right? Which is that some very old applications are using Flatpak or async IO or these sorts of things. But yeah, I mean, there were instances of sort of developer inertia, I guess, and using some older frameworks like Zope in some of the enterprise software. All right, well, I'll call it there. I'll be around if you want to ask more, but thank you very much. You've been great.